Good morning, everybody. It's your buddy Chop It On coming at you with the hyper simple guide to the small slates this afternoon on FanDuel and DraftKings. We've got a lot of combinations. It's going to be really hard to stay on track and really make this a quick video, which is my goal. We're going to try and keep this thing really short. If you are not familiar with me, you can follow me on Twitter at Chop It On. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. If you are familiar with me, you know what I'm going to say next, which is this little episode is brought to you by DFSArmy.com, your one-stop shop for all things daily fantasy sports, from MMA to PGA. And I want you to go down to the comments section, click the link, become a member today, put the content, tools, and coaching to work for you that are making people winners and better players every single day. Use the coupon code CHOP, C-H-O-P, trigger that 20% off discount, and get in here now. As for that, now that we've got the housekeeping out of the way, let's move forward into the research station today because I want to show you a couple of things. I've got all 7 games called up. The reason why is because there's a 7-game early slate on DraftKings. There's also a 3-game afternoon slate. And there's a 3-game early only slate on FanDuel. And I'm going to put in my little disclaimer here telling FanDuel you need to offer a little bit better slate coverage. Because you're either too small or too big with your slates. You've got nothing in the middle. You have the capability of controlling it. Let's not be lazy and just pick 8 o'clock start times and just 9 o'clock start times and all that, because you run off with a lot of 2 and 3 game slates, and that's just not conducive to what people want to play these days. People like 4, 5, 6 game slates too. You need to be offering it. All right? DraftKings is whipping your butt in that area. They're offering a lot of 6 and 7 game slates. Sometimes it's an early only, sometimes it's the later slate, whatever. FanDuel, get creative. Offer NL only, AL only. Offer some fun stuff instead of this same old boring 3-game slate or 12-game slate junk that you've been offering. That little diatribe aside, it's confusing to play 2 3-game slates at the same time in a 7-game slate encompassing it all, but we're going to try our best. When I'm looking at the K-score stuff or the pitching type stuff, I need to dig into my K-score number here, pull that up for you. And I'm looking at the early slate, the afternoon slate, and this is the only game you can get on the 7-game slate over on DraftKings, but Pomeranz is probably in play. I'm looking for the best overall combination of strikeout potential, which is K-score, Vegas odds, which you can see the early games don't have. You could probably run to Vegas Insider, Odds Shark, something like that. Pick up a line by now. I just didn't see one earlier this morning. And I'm looking for price. I want to see who's supposed to win the game, who's got the strikeout potential, and who's priced as low as I can possibly live with and feel good about it. So I look at a Blake Snell, and I start there with the $12,000 salary on FanDuel, 10-4 on DraftKings, and I'm a little spooked because that's really high. Now, he's a great pitcher. He's facing Kansas City, which isn't necessarily intimidating. He's got a 544 K-score by the metric, the sample size that I look at. You'll see different stuff everywhere. You know how I do it. I add strikeout percentage for the pitcher to strikeout percentage of the team he's facing, and I add them together. I get like a 54.4%. I drop the decimal point, call it 544. Looking for over a 500. That said, that's good. 544 is good. There's no line. I'm assuming that Tampa Bay is favored over Kansas City, but it's going to cost you. So I'm looking for anything I can find that would be cheaper. And on the 3-game slate on the afternoon, early only on FanDuel, I don't really see it. I would throw, Sandy Alcantara maybe in play. There's no line on that game either. 455 isn't completely terrible for K-score, but it's not great. But he is half price. And I do like the fact that he's priced up a little bit over on DraftKings if you want to use him, over there on the 7-game slate. I don't think that I would, because on the 7-game slate, I'd be looking more towards a Paddock, Marquez, Sanchez, even Pomeranz, something like that before I went for a Sandy Alcantara. But for a tournament-only type situation on the early slate on FanDuel, I would probably be considering Alcantara in, 20% of my lineups or so. But it's overwhelmingly a Snell day. The problem with that is with only 3 games, you don't have a lot of value bats to choose from. It's going to be really hard to roster Snell and then get good bats around him. So it's really kind of a poopy slate in general. It's just going to be. When they're priced up that high, it's a little bit cost prohibitive. And it drives me bonkers, which is why I complain that you need a few more games to make a few more options so that you can actually tempt some people in paying $12,000 for a pitcher, because they absolutely should today if they can find the value around them. When I look at the 7-game slate as a whole, That's when I include the Paddock, Marquez, Sanchez types, and I'm looking at 8,300 over here on FanDuel, which they're not available on FanDuel, to my knowledge, not yet anyway. Slate hadn't opened up. 9,900, 9,000. Now this is a little bit better, so I'm going to start comparing this, and I'm going to say minus 170 odds is pretty strong. 524 is only 20 points below the 544. Is it worth $1,000? Well, what is that? $500. Only $500. Is it worth $500? I don't know. Possibly not. So I might still be on Snell. I look down a little bit more at $1,400 difference, and I've got a 531, which is only 10 points below, 13 points below, 145, which is pretty strong, which is probably, I don't know what the odds would be, but they're somewhere probably around 150 to 200 in favor of Tampa Bay, I would hope. And the bottom line there is this is going to be roughly the same. Now I've got a $1,400 savings. I might take German Marquez, but Washington kind of scares me out in Coors. So again, I've got some decisions to make. If I was making multiple lineups, I'd have a little bit of each. Anibal Sanchez, don't know that I can drop all the way down there. Underdog, 490 is okay. He's got some potential. Colorado hasn't been hitting the ball great, so potential's there. But it just feels even more risky than a German Marquez. So those are kind of your rundowns, and you can see that when we're discussing these types of pitchers, we don't have a lot to choose from on the slate. Maybe tonight will be better when we come back tonight. Drew Pomeranz, kind of an even odds guy, 7,800, a little bit more than a Sanchez, a lot less than Paddock or Marquez. 484 isn't a terrible K score facing Toronto. Toronto can be a letdown at times. So, Pomeranz is in play. I do think that with the Sierra that Pomeranz is posting, I do think that Toronto's in play as well. So if you're running multiple lineups, don't be afraid to play that 7-game slate over on DraftKings and use Toronto bats in some lineups and use Pomeranz as an arm in other lineups. That's fine. But I do think today's an overwhelmingly Snell day, and it's going to be a little bit harder to get off him without taking a little bit of risk. And even he's a risk because I think he's coming back from an injury. I think he skipped a start or two. So, anywho, let's get out of there and let's look at flipping this on its head. Actually, I will bring up one more thing. When it comes to Blake Snell, Jacob Junis, German Marquez, whatever, these types of pitchers, the higher graded pitchers, look at the drop-off. From 100 DFSA grade down to 68. That's a big jump. Or a big drop. And that's telling me that Blake Snell is that far above everybody else today and should be that high a priority of mine today if I can make it work. We just kind of described that in a different way, but this is just one catch-all metric showing you that that is in fact probably the case. When I scroll over here to K-score, you can see a different sample size because we're using more of the 2-year numbers as opposed to the 1-year numbers. Then you come back to 519 and then everybody else. 487 for Paddock, which is fine, but I'm looking for over a 500, so that tells you, again, big drop-off in the potential from Snell to everybody else. What I would also look at here is W-score. I don't talk about that much, but let me explain to you why I think that's kind of why it stands out to me today. W-score is using WOBA and ISO together. So, if a guy has a 400 WOBA and a 200 ISO, he's got a 600 WOBA ISO, if you want to combine the two, coin your own phrase. And what we're looking for is a WOBA ISO for the pitcher that he allows. Okay? And we're looking for a combination of what the opposing team hits. So if Blake Snell is going up against Kansas City has a lower WOBA ISO, and Blake Snell has a lower WOBA ISO allowed against. Combine those two together, and might not be making much sense to you, but eventually it will. Combine those two together, and if you get a low number, it tells me that the pitcher doesn't allow a lot of hits or a lot of powerful hits, and the team he's facing doesn't hit him anyway. That's what that number is telling me. The lower the better for W-score when you're looking at the pitcher. Now, when you're looking at the batter on the batter's tab, you're going to want as high as possible because you want a team that's mashing the ball going up against a pitcher that's allowing you to mash, right? So high W-scores would lead towards possible teams that you should be stacking. So what have I got here? I've got a low one for Snell. Again, no surprise. Low-ish, for Marquez. He's in play. Is that Marquez? No, that's Buckholes. Interesting. So maybe you go with the Buckholes today. 418. Maybe you go to a Paddock. We've been mentioning Paddock quite a bit. Maybe that's your combo, Snell and Paddock on that 7-game slate. 431 for Dowdy. Limited sample size, I'm sure. But let's look at the high ones. This is another way you could look at Sierra. If I see a high WOBA ISO score or WOBA score and a high Sierra, I find it interesting that a lower Sierra, like a 375, and a higher W score of 491 for German Marquez, that's probably telling me that it could go either way. He should pitch fairly well, but he might give up an awful lot. But if I targeted the 500 against Jake Junis, that puts me on Tampa Bay. And if I target the 500 against Adam Wainwright, it puts me on Milwaukee. Down here, Aaron Brooks, who's that put me on? Puts me on Texas. I'm going to stay to the bottom of this chart as much as I can when I'm looking here at the DFSA grades and stay down here underneath these guys. Because now I'm looking at stacking Seattle, Miami, Texas, Oakland, whatever. I might take a shot at a Tampa Bay. I might take a shot up in here at a different set of bats based on W score or whatever I'm looking at. But generally speaking, I'm looking for the lower DFSA grade. So these would be the bats that I'd be on. So when I dive into the trends tab to wrap the video up here quickly, and we go team by team by team, we've sorted by last 7 days WOBA. Again, I like to look at the recent stuff. What have you done for me lately? And then I'll work my way backwards towards BVP. If I see a guy who's running really, really hot right now and then has a good BVP against a pitcher, I'll use that. But if I see a guy that has a good BVP against a pitcher but isn't hitting the ball well, he's off to a slow start this season, I'm going to downgrade that BVP matchup just a little bit. I want to start with what are you doing today and then work my way backwards. I may cross-reference with some historical numbers a little bit, but generally speaking, when I'm chasing these 7-day sample sizes, I'm only dealing with guys that are way over their usual anyway. I don't need the bigger sample size. I just know I want you to keep doing this one more day for me, please. That's all I care about. So when I go scrolling through these offenses, what do we say? Let's look at Miami because they were kind of weird one on the early slate. I would be looking for, well, pretty much nobody. Brian Anderson, maybe? He's cheap. He's priced up on DraftKings. That's a good sign. Starlin Castro, maybe? I mean, he's jumping from a 217 over 2 weeks ago to a 375 now. Maybe he's on the rise. Maybe I'd take a shot at that. If I was stacking Miami, I'd probably have a couple of those guys in there. If I was looking at Cleveland, because Cleveland is also facing, a mediocre pitcher today, I might be looking at, 14 plate appearances, only one per day over the last 14 days, so probably a platoon-type player, but Carlos Gonzalez, nobody really here excites me. This is when you see this, you go to more blind stacking. I just want to stack the 1, 2, 3, 4, or the 3, 4, 5, or the 2, 3, 5, or something like that. And I just hope it works out because the pitcher's in a bad spot, the offense is in a good spot. But I've got no indication that the hitters are going to do anything with the bad pitching because they're not hitting at all. Tampa Bay is one of my favorite teams on the day. 7-game slate, 3-game slate, doesn't matter. I'd be looking at Zunino and Choi, of course, if Choi starts. I'd be looking at these guys. I would also be including Pham, Yandy Diaz, maybe a little Brandon Lau, just the same as yesterday. I'm looking at these guys. They're running a little bit hotter than their average, than their 14-day numbers, so they're still ascending a little bit, telling me they're a little bit priced down, even though they are priced up. They're still bringing value to your team. I like the fact Kansas City gives up a lot of runs against. I'm in a pretty good spot here with Tampa Bay again, so I would take shots on Tampa Bay personally. Milwaukee and St. Louis, weather issues, you might want to watch for a PPD. But if you think that the game might play, then you're going to be looking specifically towards an Eric Thames, who's jumped from a 366 to a 517. Yelich, I would caution against Yelich. He hasn't hit a home run on the road yet. He hasn't been hitting, he's a 244 slug on the road or something like that this year. He's got bad road splits right now. Now, Wainwright's the kind of guy you can get right against, but as of right now, what have you done for me lately? You haven't done anything on the road. I can probably fade Yelich, hoping the ownership is sky high. However, with the rain, maybe it won't be. But if it was a normal day, hoping the ownership is sky high, I can get leverage there. Ryan Braun, Cardinal Killer, Mike Moustakas probably back. None of them hitting too terribly much, but if you wanted to really kind of force them into a stack, go for it. I'd be focused around, who did I mention? Eric Thames. St. Louis, Drew Robinson, small sample size. Matt Wieters, small sample size. If Wieters gets the start, I'd definitely look to him, though, because he's been hitting the ball well in the small sample that he's had. Jose Martinez, Dexter Fowler, interesting there at the top of the list, but there's a few more over 400 in Fowler. I guess I just mentioned him. DeYoung, Goldschmidt, the Pauls and Paulies. I wouldn't trust Matt Carpenter all that much just yet. I want to see him get a little hotter. That's why I watch this 400 number. I'd be focused on these guys up in here. Texas and Oakland's another good one. We'll review those really, really quick. We maybe touch on, I'll probably skip Seattle and San Diego. Might look at Toronto really quick, but Texas and Oakland is where I'd be focused here. Joey Gallo, of course. Hunter Pence, perhaps. Danny Santana, Sin-Soo Choo. Cabrera, these types, I'd probably be more focused on these top 3 guys. Gallo would anchor my stack. If I look at Oakland, and I throw these names out here just based on these numbers, but watch them. Watch how many of them have okay nights. A majority of them will. Some of them will disappoint you, and I can't control which ones are going to and which ones aren't. And I'm not going to dig too deeply into all these little split stats and stuff. I'm going to play with what I know. I'm going to read up. I'm going to pay attention throughout the days, and I'm just not going to dive super deep because this works most of the time. 563 for Chapman. Is that the only guy that you should be playing? No, Piscotty's fine too. But who hit the bomb last night? Chapman. He was on the list. Why? Because he's swinging a hot bat right now. I don't care if he hits 2 doubles for 2 RBIs or hits a bomb tonight. Doesn't matter. He's generally speaking doing well for his $3,800 or $4,500 salary. Stephen Piscotty would be another. I don't know that I'd consider Pinder. The rest of them have fallen off a little bit. Let's look at Toronto and let's kick this slate to the curb. Justin Smoke, Brito, Tellez, Drury. Okay, so we've got 3 or 4 bats to look at here. I'd be watching them. Look at their price down. This is good pricing. If I see these guys pop in a lineup, look at them lefty on lefty. Brito and Tellez, lefty on lefty. I might look at some kind of lefty on lefty splits. See if I can't find something there because most people will run away from this. But when you're swinging a hot bat, I almost don't mind that. I may know it's a little risky and take a little bit more of a GPP angle with it. But on this 7-game slate, I think that it might be a little bit you might overlook this game a little bit, especially these Toronto bats. I'm not saying they're going to go off for 8 runs. I'm just saying that I won't be surprised if they factor into the winning lineups today because they are that last game, and this is the only slate you can get them on both sites. So if you're wanting to play Toronto or Pomeranz or something like that, one lineup or the other, you're going to want access to this game, which means you're going to be on DraftKings on the 7-game slate, and most of those people are already been doing their research on the early games. They're probably not looking at that later game, which leaves it lower ownership for you. My tip to you. That said, let's wrap this bad boy up. 15 minutes in and out. 3 slates more or less broken down with an overall catch-all in that 7-game DraftKings slate. I'm your buddy Chop It On. You can always find me out on Twitter. You can find me inside our coaching forum inside DFSArmy.com. Again, your one-stop shop for anything DFS from NASCAR to PGA to whatever it is you want to play. Jump in, use the code in the comments down there. Use the code CHOP, C-H-O-P. Trigger that 20% off discount while you're down there. Let me know you like the video. Give me a thumbs up, give me a subscribe, and ring the little notification bell so that you get the notifications that tell you when a new video drops on your phone. You can get it anywhere, anytime. And I'll see you guys when I see you. Take care.